St. Augustine once wrote, "Music, that is the science or the sense of proper modulation, is likewise given by God's generosity to mortals, having rational souls in order to lead them on to higher things." After citing this quote, Pope Pius XII explained, "No one will be astonished that these arts have been used especially for the worship of the true and sovereign God from the earliest times. In the Catholic Church, music is a treasure of inestimable value, greater even than that of any other art. The main reason for this preeminence is that, as sacred song unites to the words, it forms a necessary or integral part of the solemn liturgy." Basically saying, music in the Church is very important, and the foremost reason for this is that it is a central part of the Mass. Mass is generally considered the greatest prayer in existence, and thus it is necessary that you don't just use any kind of music for a Mass. Pope St. Pius X talked on this, saying, "Nothing should have place, therefore, in the temple, i.e. a Catholic Church, calculated to disturb or even merely to diminish the piety and devotion of the faithful. It must be holy, and must therefore exclude all profanity, not only in itself, but in the manner in which it is presented by those who execute it." So, what am I getting at here? Thus far, nothing life-altering has been said besides pray your music well, but here's the part you may be unaware of. St. Pius also confirmed, these qualities are to be found in the highest degree in Gregorian chant, which is consequently the chant proper to the Roman Church, the only chant which she has inherited from the ancient fathers. Unless you've had an education better than most Catholics, you will have had little exposure to the concept of Gregorian chant. Pius XII wrote, "St. Paul showed us clearly that sacred chant was used and held in honor from the very beginning of the Church, founded by the divine Redeemer when he wrote to the Ephesians, 'Be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs.'" Gregorian chant was, and still is, according to the Second Vatican Council, specially suited to the Roman liturgy. Therefore, other things being equal, it should be given pride of place in liturgical services. Gregorian chant, despite its long history of use at Mass and general esteem by the leaders of the faith, is nonetheless generally disregarded by today's choir directors and musicians. However, it is important to keep it in mind as the primary selection for liturgical use. And if the earlier quotes were not hard-hitting enough to convince you of this, try Article 3 of Trae Sollecitudini, which says, "Gregorian chant has always been regarded as the supreme model for sacred music. The more closely a composition for the Church approaches in its movement, inspiration, and savor the Gregorian form, the more sacred and liturgical it becomes, and the more out of harmony it is with that supreme model, the less worthy it is of the temple." The number 2 position for music in the liturgy is more or less occupied by sacred polyphony. Vatican II explains other kinds of sacred music, especially polyphony, are by no means excluded from liturgical celebrations, so long as they accord with the spirit of the liturgical action. This indicates that at least 2 types of music are acceptable for use at Mass, and others can be used as long as they do not disobey the Church's limitations. Next, Pius X adds, although the music proper to the Church is purely vocal music, in some special cases, with due limits and with proper safeguards, other instruments may be allowed. As the singing should always have the principal place, the organ and other instruments should merely sustain and never oppress it. The Pope explains further how the organ is the best instrument to add, but says strictly what you cannot use. The employment of the piano is forbidden in church, as is also that of noisy or frivolous instruments such as drums, cymbals, bells, and the like. It is also strictly forbidden to have bands play in church. The Second Vatican Council echoes this sentiment, stating that while other instruments are allowed, the pipe organ is to be held in high esteem, for it powerfully lifts up man's mind to God and to higher things. All that information may be a lot to process, but putting it simply, music is the highest of arts in the Church and needs to be treated as such. In summary, Gregorian chant is number 1, polyphony is number 2, don't use pianos or drums, but do use the organ.